stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks very much for coming this evening. Is there anybody in the audience who's not going to otherwise present to us later on that would like to present to us at this time? All right, hearing none, we'll move on. Our student reps, where are we?
Well, I heard from one that she would not be here this evening.
Okay, so we'll just move on. Correspondence, if they come late, we'll take them. Correspondence, Karen, anything come?
I'm just looking right now quickly. There is a memo from the Director of Business Development from Clinton, actually, the Clinton schools.
I think it's a letter of introduction.
Yeah, that's all it is.
Tomorrow,
Got
Chief.
a health
Okay.
schools program for you.
Okay, we'll take a look at it and then pass it around. Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the meetings, the regular meeting minutes for October 21, 2014?
So,
Moved by Kelly, seconded by Karen. Trent, were there any corrections called in?
We're not.
Are there any corrections or comments by the Board of Ed at this time? George?
Just the question is why, the reason why the administrators were not listed on the health section.
Were they here? On the 20?
Yeah. No, I think they
I don't think they were here, but we'll take, how about if we just take that under advisement, we'll look at that. If they're here, they get listed, Trent, but I do recall the meeting, I don't think that they were here at that time.
We honored Sheila and Mandy.
On the 21st?
Oh, okay, so this was the
So
meeting
we
before
never left
that,
them.
right? All right, so we'll list them. So the correction is, if you notice those before the meeting, call them in ahead of time.
I emailed Trent.
Okay,
So
so,
Bill has not gotten it,
so we will add the administrators, and we have some and not others, so building administrators will be added.
We'll get the corrected attendance.
Okay. Any other comments or corrections? All right, so hearing no further comment, all those in favor of approval say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Okay, passes.
I'm
Yes.
just gonna say.
And abstain. Abstain. All right. We have a couple of items that I think we might have some guests at some point. But are we, Mike, are you here to talk about the Healthy Community, Healthy Youth Survey, your foundation? All right, so, and that's first on our list. So why don't we take that? I always want to make sure we accommodate our guests. So why don't we take the Old Saybrook Education Foundation presentation first?
Thank you very much. It's good to see everybody. We appreciate the superintendent inviting us to speak at the beginning of the school year. The offices this year, I will continue as president of the foundation. Dr. Nico Kondulis is vice president. Julie Pendleton is the secretary. And behind me is Becky Lynch, who will be the treasurer this year. As you know, we had a very successful auction last March. We raised over $46,000. We received from the parent membership envelopes that are distributed through the 3 school student packets this fall over $2,000 from the parents. We feel the foundation is becoming more and more present in the minds of the Old Saybrook community, which is what was one of the main objectives last year when we started. Our emphasis this year will be enhancement grants. We're calling the grants enhancement grants, so that it will help students and staff to improve student learning. All the requests for the grants are to be aligned with the revised Old Saybrook Public Schools strategic plan, which you people have been part of, and to align with very specific curricular expectations. Our mission is we will supplement the school's budget, but not supplant the school budget. Our direction this year will be focused on technology in all 3 schools, and the technology programming at Old Saybrook Middle School and Old Saybrook High School. Nico and I met with all the 3 school staff on Wednesday, October 8th, and made them aware of our support and the direction for this year. You were given a list last May of all the grants that we gave, and thus far this year, we've already given Safe Grad Night again, the RAMS booklet, the submarine registration, a speaker for Old Saybrook High School, Legos technology at the middle school, SRBI literacy at the middle school, technology, middle school science program technology, Rockfall grant transportation, 8th grade team activity support, the junior Washington DC trip, we gave 4 scholarships for that this year, 2nd grade Native American field trip, And lastly, a theater production that includes pre-K, K, and grade 1. So it's a real nice collaboration in the school. How can we help Old Saybrook Public Schools is a question that we always ask. And how can you help the foundation? So ideas, if you have a Swiss chalet somewhere that you'd like to auction this year, publicly support us, share any ideas with us that you think we can help with, attend or donate an auction for this year's auction. And the auction this year will be Friday, March 13th, just before St. Patrick's Day. So just keep that in mind before the big March Madness gets going for basketball. So it's going to be on Friday, March 13th at Saybrook Pointing again. That's the report, except that Hess and I have as a treasurer's report that Becky would like to comment on.
What you see up here is the foundation's income and expenses from our beginnings in January 2008. The foundation did begin earlier than that, but the records are pretty minimal for what we have. So we started with 2008, and this includes, we added to last year's figures that you had, and what we added was in donations, we had about $23,000. Our fundraiser was $46,000. So over last year, we also had gifts of $2,000. We raised about $68,000 in income last year for our foundation, and we spent $65,000 of it. So our goal is always to raise it and spend it, and the expenditures were in $39,000 in scholarships, $23,000 in grants to our students and our schools, and then our operational expenses were about $2,700. So we're pretty efficient in how we spend our money and use it. And then, as I said, we try to spend everything we raise. So the more we raise, the more people help us, the more opportunities we have to spend some money. We had some excellent presentations at our meeting last week by the technology departments of all 3 schools, or actually, excuse me, the middle school and the high school. So we're looking at some additional grants from what we've already approved that I think will be incredibly important for the district. So your help is always needed, and just coming to the event, and I know some of you came last year, some of you enjoyed some of the great auction items, and we're working on it this year. So that is what our mission is to raise it and spend it.
Easy. In and out.
Questions?
Questions, Vito? No. Any questions or comments from the board? Yes, George?
So, again, this is fantastic what you guys do for the students. Just a quick question. Over this period from 2008 to 2014, is the income coming, is it pretty much steady? Is it going up?
Oh, it's gone up dramatically.
Oh, fantastic.
I mean, we used to be happy to make $5,000, not $46,000. So we had tremendous support from the community in the auction items themselves, and so it has. Every year we exceed pretty dramatically what we had done in the prior year.
Any other comments or questions? Well, on behalf of the Board of Education and all the students and programs that you help, thank you all very, very much. And please thank the other members of the
We
foundation.
have a couple
for
of
us.
people that resigned for various reasons, but we also had a few new people. But last week's meeting, we had inducted a new member, Colby Redway, who's a young lady that graduated from Old Saybrook High School. Her parents have been here for a very long time, and her brother and she graduated. We're thrilled to have a young, no offense to anyone, but a young person who really is very excited to join on. And that's the type of, we're really recruiting. So if you have any ideas about that, let us know. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
So much.
All right, so we are now at the turf, track, and tennis court update, and basically going to turn it over to Phil, Jan, and Julie to get us up to speed as to where we are.
Okay. Well, we had basically we have the contractor is back working, responded to the basically ultimatum he gave, and started removing the drains, and I know they've been pushing the topsoil around a bit. I know there was a construction meeting last Friday, and I'm not fully aware of what happened there. I didn't go by, I went by yesterday, they were still working on it yesterday, so. At the meeting, at the Triple T meeting that we had recently, a lot of the discussion was over oversight of the contractor from here on out, and trying to get a timeline, have the contractor do some of the things that are actually expected under the contract. The timeline for their work for the next 2 weeks. I don't know if did they come up, or are they still working on that, or?
Yeah, we didn't quite get to that, but they promised that they will have that moving forward. So we'll look a week ahead and 2 weeks ahead. And the reason for having sort of 2 looks at it is because now weather becomes an issue. If there's a significant snowfall, then work will take on a very different look than we're hoping. You know, they're saying that if weather does not become an issue, we could be looking for this turf park to be completed around the Christmas holiday. But, as I said, one snowfall will completely change that. And a lot of work was accomplished at the construction meeting this Friday. Julie was there, I was there, and Sheila Riffle was there. And we were able to put a lot of issues on the table and come to at least some temporary agreements to move forward. And so I think that you're seeing the results of that out there this week. They've been pretty busy. I didn't go today. I don't know if either of you had an opportunity. What did you see?
Yeah, they're hauling off a lot of material at this point. Today was pretty productive. They're bringing it and storing it right down the road. They're paying a local contractor to store it. So they're trying to move, and I think they're hauling it off pretty quickly. So, as Jan said, weather permitting, that's kind of where we're at. But we have it all documented in our meeting minutes. The engineer, I thought, did a very comprehensive job of producing a set of minutes that represented what we had discussed at that meeting, and once those are finalized, we can share them with the committee.
One of the things I was pleased to hear at the construction meeting was that the engineer and the contractor will go together on the same day to the quarry and take the same samples of and they will each test those samples, so that we will know the source, we will know that both people went to the source at the same time, that they're sampling the same materials. We thought that that was a significant resolution to some of the concerns I know we all had been discussing, both at this meeting and at the 3T meeting. So I was pleased to hear that. And there was a lot of talk about testing and sampling along the way, and the schedule for that. So getting that agreed to up front.
Yep, that's all in those minutes too, so that will be very helpful.
Okay. All right. As Luke said, they were expecting to be here 3 or 4 times a week to inspect the progress of the work. And then, of course, we're around. Julie's around. And did Luke indicate what days he was going to be here, or so that we could cover the days he's not?
They're coming almost every day.
Yeah.
So, and they're
Good
coming.
question. We did ask for that
Mhm.
schedule, so we need to do that, get that tomorrow.
Right, so they're supposed to give us Thursday. They're gonna give us that finalized schedule, and then Guerrera also indicated that on those, the times when there were more significant work being accomplished, or before things were, covered, or, or inspections and that sort of thing would happen throughout sort of pivotal parts of the project. So they were gonna provide us that schedule on Thursday.
Okay. So they didn't present any, there wasn't any request for any payments at all made at the last meeting, so it'll be a little while before we see that.
I think one has been submitted to the engineer, but there's not an agreement on that right now. So
It has to be certified by the engineer before we go to your committee, before we come to our committee, so there's time. All right.
So what motion on the Wednesday?
At this point, I don't think we are. That was put in there in case.
Okay, good.
We were not sure, based on the Friday construction meeting and when the agenda gets posted. We did not want to have to, for something that's sensitive, go for the 2/3 and make it a meeting action item. So I don't believe we're actually seeing there's no certified invoice, and there's no other action for the board. Would that be a correct assessment? So are there any questions or comments by the Board of Education at this time on the update on the turf track tennis court? Thank you very much, and for those of you who persisted, staff and committee members who persisted with this project, thank you, Phil. George?
Two quick questions, are the tennis courts done?
They're pretty much done. There's a little bit of additional fencing to do. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it was the fencing, I think that was pretty much it. And then where the nets were gonna go into storage, they're not gonna be put out now.
The hole for the poles will be done in the
Right.
spring, but the hook that holds the net in place, they were gonna go ahead and do now.
Excellent, thank you. Any further comments or questions? All right, thanks an awful lot, Phil. And, obviously, Jan and Julie have been dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. Budget update, 14-15 budget update. Jan, Julie?
I'm gonna ask Julie to report this. This is something she shared with me a few days ago, and I think she's got it pretty well explained here.
I think most of the details are in the memo that was in your packet. We completed our first quarter projection, and it was pretty much almost on target with what our very early estimates were, with 140,000 surplus in salaries and about 136,000 currently surplus in health insurance. There were some offsets to that surplus with transportation and special education. When all the pieces are combined, we are looking at a very small positive balance at this point. And again, that's projecting everything through. As I noted, there's additional purchases, so when you look at your report, the report looks like we have a surplus at this point in time. We still have about $375,000 or $312,000 of unencumbered funds, and those are for the supplies for like the second half of the year. So we anticipate that that money will be expended, which will then put our budget, our report over by over $300,000. However, you have to remember we get our excess cost agency placement grant to offset some of those special ed costs, both in transportation and in tuition. So once that's received and applied against those expenditures, we anticipate a fairly level budget by the end of the year. Not a huge surplus, but not a deficit.
Okay. Questions or comments on where we are with the 14-15 budget update? Okay, thank you very much. The wrestling cooperative. Jean?
This was brought to you last week as a proposal, and we were hoping that you would consider taking action on this tonight. We did proceed and post a wrestling coach position pending the approval of the board. People know that that's not a position at this time. But as you can see, the overall cost is about a $2,200 difference from what we currently have budgeted for this program. And it would allow some of our students to participate. And maybe Ms. Riffle can talk a little bit about our 8 students, right, who want to participate in wrestling.
Between the two schools, we have 9 to 10 students. Right now, we know of 8 students at Old Saybrook High School, which is fairly consistent with last year's team. And then a certain 1, possibly 2 additional students at Westbrook. Jeff and I have continued to talk about the issue of practice space. I mean, in terms of practice, I don't know if that's up there, if that's the rental fee that's included there. I know that we're getting a huge savings as part of community programming through the YMCA. It would typically be $7,000+ for this 60-some days that we would need the space for practice, and we're getting it for somewhere between 25 and 3,000. We've talked about, can we save on that cost in practice at the high school, and we continue to fight with the issue of space. The only place that we can think of would be the cafeteria, which in that small of a space, not sure we want, student athletes sweating in the space and then kids coming in to eat the next morning. I have seen the cafeteria of other schools used as that space, but then our problem becomes, where do we store those mats? So it looks as though if we move forward, we would need to continue to use the YMCA as practice space. We have the 8 to 10 students that we are looking at being involved. And we could possibly get a few more involved in that. And we've interviewed one candidate, when we were given permission to go ahead and post the position. We've gotten interest from one person. We have a teacher on staff, a newer teacher new to us, who is a certified coach who has expressed interest in possibly assisting, but not head coach. So we have some potentials to keep this program going.
Questions or comments? Kelly?
Just the fees are inverted.
Yeah,
They are.
yeah, they're flipped.
Bottom. And it's changed since these numbers were put together. It's sounding more like it might be 80-20 or 90-10. So that's just, to give you, the total's correct, but to give you a, kind of, we may pick up more of that than.
So, based on what you said, we have about $10,000 budgeted, and that's asking for about $12,000. Am I reading it correctly?
Right.
Although that may be.
No, I knew it was flipped, yeah. Go ahead, Peter.
Just two quick questions. The coach's salary is in line with what other coaches get?
I would believe so,
Oh,
yeah.
stipend position.
It's a
Stipend, yeah.
So as long, so now, and have we looked at any type of, and we're looking for space, and these gymnastic places that are around that have mats available?
I don't believe we've looked at any of those options. I think that the space is one of our lesser costs in the whole thing, but, and we do own the mats. When the program started, apparently Westbrook and Saybrook went together in purchasing the mats. I think we're open to looking for another space if we can get it for less.
The transportation fee, of course, is the big expense,
Yeah.
and no matter where we're transporting, we're gonna
Yeah.
spend that money, but
Right.
good look at that.
With looking.
There's one in the industrial park, and,
Right.
I don't even know if they're open that time, maybe it would be available.
Ideally, we would find a qualified coach who has a van license, who can, transport the kids with one of our vehicles to and
Well,
from
to the practice, it's no problem. We utilize our bus. M&J just fixed them up, and on one of the runs he drops them, so that's not the issue.
That's
That
not an additional
transportation
cost.
cost is to the matches.
Oh, okay.
That's what that's about, so.
George, did you have your hand up? No. Okay. Karen? Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments?
I would just
Go
like
ahead,
to
Jean.
add that
Sure.
this is in keeping, we're trying to grow our athletic programs. I know that at some point, a small school has to worry about spreading itself too thin, but until we know which programs aren't viable, or if they aren't viable, I'm happy to throw my support in and to ask for support for these programs so we can keep our kids engaged. That's been one of our goals, was one of our reasons for having the athletic director position constructed the way we have it, and all of this is supporting it. And they're looking at other opportunities too, and we're always looking with an eye to supporting that strategic plan, supporting that goal of keeping students involved, but we also know there's cost associated with it, and we also know that our student body is only so big. And so we will keep that in mind as we move forward.
And this is a one-year pilot, as you brought it forward last time, right?
Yes, and this was not the one-year pilot, but we will be budgeting, making a budget request for this annually. The unified sports was the
Oh,
one-year
the
pilot.
unified sports
Yep.
one, you're sorry, okay,
Yep.
thank you. But this will be budgeted every year.
Right.
And so it comes back every year for reconsideration.
The stipend also has to be,
MOU.
a memorandum of understanding to add it to the contract.
So, if there's no other comment, and we can certainly have more discussion after there's a motion, I need a motion to approve the restructuring of the Old Saybrook Westbrook Wrestling Cooperative as it has been presented. Who would move that? Kelly, seconded by Joanne. Any further discussion on the motion to approve the restructuring as it's been presented? which would include the budgeting that's part of the memo. Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Okay, so any abstentions, rather? All right, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hope they win.
I'll let you know.
Completion of the developmental assets survey, Mr. Sutman?
Yes, since 1997, we have been working with Healthy Community, Healthy Youth to administer the survey. Last time was 2010, so we're due. This time will be electronic. So this week, the high school students will be filtering through the computer labs to take a survey of roughly 150 questions. Middle school is slated for next week. Getting 5 grades through is a challenge as well. But the data that we get back is very worthwhile, and that data is shared not only with us, but with the community at large. And we know that many programs have come from the results of those surveys. We sent home a letter via email to all parents of grades 6 through 12, as well as have hard copies in the offices for any parents that don't receive email. We have hard copies for them. And there's also a copy of the survey itself available in all the offices, so parents can come and check them out. They can't take a copy with them, obviously, but they're there for their review. And parents do have the opportunity to opt out their students if they choose not to participate. I don't know if you've received any requests of such.
One.
Yes, one? One? Okay, so 2 students so far have opted out. So we look forward to getting those results, and we certainly appreciate the support of Healthy Community, Healthy Youth with getting this data back.
All right, any comments or questions? All right, thanks very much. And you're on again for the State of Connecticut Student Assessment Calendar.
As in years past, the state publishes a calendar of the windows of when we can begin and when we must finish the assessments. Keep in mind that we still give the CMT and CAP Science. SBAC is grades 3 through 8 and grade 11. So you can see the various windows that are available. And very soon I will start to work with the building administration as to building these schedules. It's a bit more complicated now, of course, because we have to get students into computer labs. The SBAC test will remain untimed, so that's also another variable. But we have a better idea of how long it takes students. And we are expecting that this administration, we will be getting back individual student results. Where this previous test, we haven't received any results yet, but we think we're going to get an aggregate grade level scores, but not individual student scores. So our infrastructure held up very well last year as far as technology, and we feel that we are that much more prepared to administer this year. So just letting you know that the windows have been set, and we are beginning that planning process for that. Another big piece of this is as PPTs happen for our special education students, they are planning on the accommodations that will be available. All those accommodations come through my office as well, and the tests now are able to have the accommodations programmed into them, which is better for our students. So we're moving forward, and we're not quite ready yet, but we're building our plan.
Okay. Any comments or questions about the assessment schedule?
Question, so for the 5th and 8th graders, are you going to, how do I say, just pull the Band-Aid out and just give them all at once, or are you going to spread out the pain for them?
5th through 8,
No, just
oh,
the 5th
5 and 8.
5 and 8, yeah.
CMT
And-
science will come first.
Yeah.
That window's a little bit earlier, so we'll, I don't want to say get that assessment out of the way, but yes, we will pace it out so that,
Basic, you
yes.
won't just give them the whole dose all at once,
no.
pull the Band-Aid out.
And we know that these test results are just one snapshot of our children, and we look at them holistically, and we look at all programs, so we keep this in perspective as well.
Thanks. Any other comments or questions on the assessment? All right, the music field trip that we heard about last time, and I guess Ms. Riffle will, Mr. Milton, or will you?
We are,
Jan?
yeah, we're both going to act on their behalf. We were actually supposed to put all 3 of these field trips on the last schedule, and through some miscommunication, 2 of them came off. So I said, rather than making them come back, but we would present these. This is something you approved last year, so it's something that happens annually. And there are 2 field trips, and I will Would you like to take the lead on them?
Sure.
Okay.
These are, as Jan said, annual trips taken by our music department. All students are given the opportunity to audition for these groups. Both of these are by audition, so any student who comes forward with our music department staff and says, I'd like to take a shot at this, staff will work with them individually as much as possible. Students are expected to do a lot of this work outside of the classroom on their own. They have to prepare solo materials. For the Connecticut level trip that they are requesting permission to take, there is, students have to audition for and be accepted to the regional level, at the regional level first, and then those students that are accepted to the regional level have the option to audition for All-State. Typically every year we have about 2 to 3 students that participate at the All-State level, and then the New England Music Festival also by audition, and these are all personal auditions. They're not taped or recorded auditions. Students opt to go and are taken for these opportunities. Typically, annually, the last 3 to 4 years, we've had anywhere between 10 and 15 students who make it through the New England Festival Association as accepted to perform in that group. So both are overnight trips. One, you have the information in front of you. One, they stay with those families. The other, with the smaller group of students, typically they're staying in a hotel. They're right in Hartford with a culminating performance in each opportunity.
So you want to do the CME All-State first and then the New England, or take them all? So CME All-State, any questions on the All-State that was just being described? Okay, do you want to do them one at a time? Motion to approve the CMEA All-State field trip as it's been presented?
So,
Moved by Karen,
second.
seconded by, is that Holly? Oh, Joanne. Thought I heard something over there. And any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed or abstentions? Okay, so thank you, that one passes unanimously. The New England Music Festival field trip.
So,
Did you already talk about that one as well?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
they're
the
all the
one,
same.
we typically have more students that get
Okay, that's the
into
more
them.
student
Yeah.
one, and they're with the host homes. All right, so that was moved by Karen, seconded by, got Holly that one. And any further discussion on the motion to approve the New England Music Festival field trip? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, are there any opposed or any abstentions? All right, excellent, thank you very much,
Great,
those
thank you.
pass.
Thank you.
Climate survey results, Mr. Sutton, Ms. Riffle, Ms. Ryan is here, Ms. Brown.
Each year, we administer climate surveys to our students, to our staff, to our families, our parents. And the data used from these surveys are fed into an overall climate plan for each building. We're in the process of creating those plans right now, and 3 building principals will give you some updates of where we are. Once the plans are finalized, they'll be posted to our website, as well as shared with the State Department of Education. It is a state mandate that we have these plans in place. And the last piece I'll share with you, the results of these surveys also are used to measure our growth as far as our teacher evaluation system. There's a parent feedback component, so the results of these surveys also feed into that component as well.
Okay.
Start with the little guys, or you want to start with the big guys?
I'll start.
Okay.
A committee of folks who attended Joanne Freyberg's 3-day conference on creating safe school climate committee made up of Denise Tedesco, our school counselor, paraprofessionals, teachers, and our SRO officer. And they took with them the results of the survey. It was discovered at that time, and of course that's how the teams worked at the training, that more information they couldn't really glean anything, and I know in one of my meetings with the superintendent, we really couldn't put our arms around anything really specific to attack as a committee. So this group of folks then began to spread their wings a bit and incorporated several other community members and an additional parent, and created the Positive School Climate Committee at Goodwin. And in June, they designed another survey that really dealt specifically with instead of the community at large, the school community. And the purpose truly was to give them some specific directions on what to do and how to work toward creating what we all want to celebrate as a positive school climate. And Freiburg's design says very explicitly that a positive school climate automatically creates a positive school culture. And the positive school climate is all about relationships, how students respond to each other, how teachers respond to each other, and how students and teachers respond to each other. So it really, we felt that we would be embracing everybody by zeroing in on having the certified and non-certified staff complete this survey. They met again in early August and designed a professional development presentation at one of our PD days prior to the opening of school. We chose a day where all of the paras were also present, and teachers, and we had a very successful 3 hours together, launching much of what Joanne Freiberg's training provided them, as well as opportunities for teachers and paras to lay the groundwork for a sense of respect and common commitment to the school culture. The feedback was specifically, can we do it again soon? There were some exercises, specifically one where people looked around the room and found someone that they didn't know very well. And they chose that person to interview, and they went off to a private space and interviewed that person with some designed questions to begin to open up a level of trust and commitment to conversation. And then they came back and shared with the entire group one thing they learned about this person that they would have been very surprised to find out. So it was just cracking that little bit of a shell to get to know who the people were that you work with every day. Then one of this committee also did design a t-shirt, the Positive Climate, Positive Culture t-shirt with the big, Don Renato and Jermaine Johnson designed it, so you can imagine the affective use of a big, giant, sunlit heart in the middle of this positive school. So every single adult in the building received a t-shirt. Student, teachers, interns, custodians, everyone. We wear them at all Goodwin gatherings and all school-wide functions. There's 113 big gold hearts around the school, and it obviously gives kids a sense of unity. If nothing else, they kind of wish they had one, so we're seeing what to do about that. Then this committee, this Positive School Climate Committee, decided that it would be very important for them to meet in late August, again to decide some very specific criteria to focus on for the school year. One of them was that the school really did not have a consistent, committed set of standards of behavior for venues throughout the school, whether they be in the cafeteria, the bus, the playground, what have you, that it seemed as though whoever you were, wherever you were, you had a different set of expectations. So this committee created a set of expectations for behavior instead of rules, for the hallway, for the cafeteria, for the playground, for the equipment, anywhere where students gather with less than immediate attention, and pretty much more non-instructional settings. And once those expectations of behavior were approved over 2 staff meetings and lots of input, including parental input and student input, signs were made professionally that now hang at student eye level in the hallways, in the cafeteria. They're posted on doors that is a student's exit for recess. And they're very, very simple, and they include visual cues for kids who can't read. And they're very, very effective because it not only reminds the kids, but it also reminds the teachers that, you know, we all agreed on these rules. This is what we expect of children in the hallways, in the gym, etc. So far, they've been really effective. The kids, you know, every once in a while when they're passing by, they'll point to something and give us some signals. I think that one of the more important things that have happened is that teachers and paras have come to an agreement about what they should be expecting of each other in terms of consequences and reporting, etc. One of the pieces of our of Joanne, a melding of Joanne's philosophy and the philosophy of responsive classroom is student responsibility for behavior. So something that's been very consistent at Goodwin throughout my tenure there anyway is what we call a reflective passage. Students are asked in preschool as well as third grade to go to a private place, think about anything they've said or done, think about what they could have done differently, who did it impact, etc. And it usually results in an apology, either a letter or a one-on-one apology. That is now in full, you know, we've done it now for 3 or 4 years. It's part of our parent handbook. Everybody kind of knows. The teacher signs off, the child signs off, and so does the parent. So it's a conversation that everybody has that we share in terms of, you know, individual responsibility for behavior. And it's very, very effective because kids actually kids don't sometimes even recognize the impact of their behavior on other kids. It's usually spontaneous, it's thoughtless, it's just momentary. So this is an opportunity for them to really kind of think not only what they did, but how it impacted somebody else. And that's part of the reflective practice and also reflective of the responsive classroom philosophy. The Positive School Climate Committee meets each month for 2 hours just prior to a faculty meeting. And anything that they develop and that they come up with is shared with the faculty. And we're in hopes of doing a mid-year check with families and teachers and paras to see how things are going, if things have gotten any better, because that was essentially one of the critical negative issues that came up on our personal survey. And then, of course, at the end of the year, we're expecting, hopefully, to see a huge improvement in terms of that consistency and collaboration. We have monthly Goodwin gatherings where children are now starting to create skits, and we choose one behavior each month, and the third graders will meet during lunch and create a skit around showing the rest of the school what that behavior might look like if it was a good behavior or not so good behavior, and then kids, they kind of model the reflective practice conversation. It's really adorable. Teachers modeled it first. The how are we doing survey in January will also be followed by a parent forum. We're really wanting to share with parents an important conversation about having common language about behavior. We really do feel like if our little classroom constitutions can reflect expectations at home, that, you know, that really gives students even a greater sense of partnership between home and family. And finally, the entire school has adopted this notion of a positive and safe place to be as our school-wide goal for the year. So teachers will be putting hopefully a lot of time and thought and energy into how they personally and professionally are contributing to our goal. So that's our update.
You think the third graders would come to the high school and teach the kids how to...
You want to see our signs? It's like,
be fun.
Middle school, maybe?
Okay. We continue our Respect Initiative, which started 6 years ago, making some tweaks to it, though, as it's grown. So a lot of the things, the expected behaviors posted throughout the building have been there. Some of the criticisms in the past few years have been that it had been more punitive than positive, so that was one of our focuses over the past 2 years, was to really bring in that positive sense with the Respect Initiative. So this year, in conjunction with our PBI or our SPDG grant, we really tried to make a lot of our rewards more consistent in the school. We really talked about the 3 positives to the 1 correction and really looking at that ratio for our students. All of the students received, or all of the teachers received RAM stamps that we made with that logo. And in addition to giving some corrective with, as a communication to parents, our students received stamps for, good behavior, stopping, helping students, and they actually can, it's a token economy, so they buy things with it. I don't know if I should say this, but I'm going to. I added a foosball table to my office this year, and they are allowed to buy foosball with the principal, and my door is constant. And then they finish, and they say, we're gonna go learn more. So that piece is great. We added town meetings across the board, so monthly town meetings that we've had, but we're really soliciting some more positives from the specials teams, not just parents, getting all of the faculty involved in celebrating our students. This year, all of the teams received 2 printouts of labels of every student, and it's their check system to make sure they're sending good guy positive notes home. So we know if the labels haven't been used, we have to really look to find some of the positive things that our students have done. We also started this year, I'm not sure where it is, but we started a Celebrating You notebook for our teachers. So it started with I noticed that you did this and a great job, and it goes from that teacher to somebody else, and we don't know where it ends up. It just goes randomly and anonymously to teachers, so we're trying to celebrate our teachers as well, and that's been very successful. In looking at our Safe School Climate Committee met at least 6 times last year. We were pretty active. We had parents on the committee, 4 parents. We had students on the committee. We had a paraprofessional on the committee, teachers from every grade level, administration, and our SRO. We created a pamphlet. We created a mission and vision for our Safe School Climate, what we were going to do and how we were going to affect the climate. We had a table at open house with the pamphlet, and we had it manned by actually the SRO and the paraprofessional. We broke into 2 subcommittees. One of them was to work on editing our survey, and one was to work on the PR campaign. We did a lot of work on the survey last year. This year, one of our parents has now moved to the high school, so we've replaced that parent. We still have 3 parents, I think, on the committee. We have 4 students, and we met to review our results. We were really happy with our results, actually. We looked at the student results, and we really celebrated where we were with our school climate. The one thing that we did notice in our results was there was a difference in student perception of climate and parent perception of climate. By and large, the students reported a much more positive school climate than the parents reported. And so one of my professional goals this year is about positive communication with all stakeholders, because we're not doing a good job communicating everything that we've been doing in the school. So I revamped my monthly newsletter, and it includes a Safe School Climate update every month. It also includes a safety update every month. So it's about climate and then the things that we're putting in place for safety. And that has been received very well. We presented the results of that climate survey to our staff on November 3rd, and we have drafted our new Safe School Climate Plan. A lot of the things are maintenance, where we're at, continuing to do some of the things we've done in the past, but really to really boost that communication piece to all stakeholders. So it's not just students, it's not just parents, but a concerted effort with some internal communication. We did some of that by combining the makeup of our committee with some of our other committees so that there's some synergy between them and that we're all rowing in the same direction. So people who sit on our Respect Committee also sit on the Safe School Climate Committee. There's some that also sit on our Pride, which is our advisory committee, so that we're all making decisions that kind of go together and we're all moving in the same direction, and there's a commonality in terms of our vision as we move forward. So that's been very helpful. We did spend our first 3 days, like we've done in the past, of school with climate building, and I shared that with the board at the beginning. That was followed by some team building activities for each grade level. Our faculty meetings have included some collaboration activities with rubrics that we're now using for our students, so that there's expected behaviors for collaboration, and the teachers have lived that now as well. Let's see, just a couple other positives we've done just to continue to build the the climate is we've obviously gone over the mandated bullying training for our students and staff. We've added a birthday announcement on our morning news, which is kind of fun. I get to wear a hat and blow that little horn and say happy birthday to all the kids for that week. We added a morning exercise to our morning news just because we know it's very good for concentration. It gets kids kind of up and working together in a community. And we do occasional reminders on the morning news about some of our expected behaviors. So as a group, if our respect committee does see some behaviors that need to be corrected, I've gone on and said, okay, remember when we're in the hallway, we walk on the right-hand side of the hallway, and we have a kind of campy video that we show that the kids really like. So we have done that, and one of our focuses, lastly, I think, is that we have been really looking at bullying, kind of trying to look at different bullying curricula. Heston has sent a few things. We've brought it to our committee, and we really felt that based on the results of our climate survey, we didn't really want to focus on an anti-bullying curriculum because the climate results were so good, but we really wanted to focus on more of a kindness curriculum. So we're looking at a random act of kindness. It's actually a curriculum where we can just focus on the positive of what our students are doing, and we as a committee are looking that over and will make recommendations as we move forward. So that is pretty much where we're at. We will meet, actually, our committee meets Thursday, and we will finalize our plan. So we have our plan drafted based on the results. We'll finalize it, and then hopefully we'll be able to post it pretty soon because we anticipate having it finalized in our meeting on Thursday. So.
Sure.
Just add a little thing. Policy committee just met tonight looking at all the new legislation and how that's transferred into policy, and one of them does have some information for our climate plan.
Okay.
Certainly for the middle school and high school level, and that's all the new legislation on dating violence, which we now have to address in our climate plan. So as you're finalizing, leave a little space for that.
Okay.
We'll have that.
Okay, and that's 6/12, right?
Right.
You know, I came in late, but I'm so interested in the climate survey, so I wondered if they're available, because each school had distributed a different type of climate survey, and
We met as the 3 administrators a number of times last spring to bring our committee's recommendations on the survey forth so that we could kind of have something similar but developmentally appropriate. So
Right.
we all had a similar survey, and we have the results. They do get posted on the website. We just haven't posted them yet, but I have them by our school if you want to drop by, or you can even come to the
What
committee meeting.
what I told, what I said I would do is that you would just forward them, probably to Heston, since that's his area, and then we will forward them, we'll put them up for the board to look at.
Who compiled the thing? We didn't do it individually.
I came and worked with Linda and got our school one.
Yeah, because I never saw them results. You know, I never compiled them, so it must have been done here.
I think we're just looking for the questions too, and
Oh,
then
okay.
the general results.
Questions were,
SurveyMonkey compiles the results.
yeah, all right,
It then gets forwarded to you.
right, that's what I mean. I
Yeah.
didn't compile the data. So it's probably here, because I know in my conference with the superintendent, you know, we had the data, but it wasn't generated by me.
Sheila.
I'm listening to skits by 3rd graders and foosball with the principal, and I'm going, all right, at the high school, I think kids would see that as a consequence instead of a reward. So who knows, maybe I could borrow that idea for and use it in a different way. They would want to throw darts or shoot pool or something. We don't have space for.
Our 8th graders like pizza lunches with the teachers. That's another thing.
Oh, yeah?
So you're.
Maybe we can carry that over.
That never grows old.
Pizza lunches
People
with
would
the
like it
teachers.
too.
All right. Wow, we've put quite a focus, as have the other 2 schools, on school climate in the last year and couple of months. We have a PBIS committee that serves as our Safe School Climate Committee. That came out of the SPD grant that Mandy mentioned, that has been a part of the high school now. We actually got an extension, and we're in year 3 of what's supposed to be a 2-year grant. Added people to that team last year, representative, we have students and teachers representative of pretty much all departments on that committee. And some of the most exciting stuff that's come out of that committee, 2 major things. We did a huge push, and I think I talked about it at a previous board meeting, for developing our core attributes as a school community and getting kids and everyone involved and having a voice in that process. So we Combined with advisory, you do have a couple people on the PBIS committee who are also on the advisory committee. And through the advisory venue, we took our learning expectations, our core values that were developed and revised over the last few years, shared that information with advisories and took students through a process of identifying, highlighting. Actually, we turned it into a Wordle. That's what we did, and we highlighted, had students highlight key terms that they thought were the attributes that were most important to a high school positive climate. And also most representative of who we're trying to be. And from that, they prioritized those terms that they highlighted in pairs and submitted those to advisory. We took the faculty at a following faculty meeting through a similar process so that we could develop a full list of the terms through our learning expectations and core values that students and adults were identifying as key attributes. In a following advisory session, everyone was asked to, each advisory, whether it was several from one advisory or the advisory as a whole, were asked to submit, whether it's acronyms, 3 to 5 terms that they felt were the key, most important aspects of how we should behave and represent ourselves and what we should be striving for at Old Saybrook High School. From those submissions, the advisory committee went through them and chose 15 as the top entries. Most of them were acronym related. Some of them even included some fun drawings. Advisory committee chose the top 15. They were posted all over the faculty room. Faculty had to go in, they had stickers, they had to vote, and from there we took the top 5 and put those out to the student body, and then the students voted. And Pride, as you've heard me mention before, it turns out it's very much in line with middle school's Pride initiative, but Pride was the one that won through that school-wide adult and student vote, standing for perseverance, respect, integrity, dedication, and excellence. So that's really been the theme that we have revolved around in terms of climate and just who we're striving to be as a school community. That same committee at the end of last school year got together and provided some guidance on how we might expand our current privilege system that previously has only been available to seniors. Senior privilege involves seniors being able to leave campus if they're meeting certain requirements, whether it's at the beginning of the day if they have a study hall, or at the end of the day leaving early. Arriving late, leaving early. What the PBIS committee put in place was a study hall privilege system where we opened up the cafeteria as a more of a social study hall space, because prior to that our only study hall space was classroom, or seniors who had privileges, the library media center. And what we were finding was the library media center really wasn't very conducive to studying in many cases, just because of the volume of students that were going there, and the fact that we had a lot of seniors who would have open study halls in the middle of the day but really nowhere to go because they weren't assigned to a study hall, and we certainly didn't want them just hanging out in the hallways, so everybody would end up where they were allowed to be, which is the LMC. So we expanded the privilege system to sophomores and juniors. We set a grade requirement pretty much that mirrored what the previous senior privilege requirement had been. We also looked at attendance and behavior, and students started the year if they were in grades 10, 11, and 12, because we added the seniors to this assigned study hall piece. Either in an assigned study hall or a privileged study hall. And with privileged study hall, they could either choose the LMC if they felt that they needed more quiet, or they needed a computer, or they needed more of a study space that was conducive to that, or if they felt that they could socialize and do their homework and stay on top of things, and they wanted to have a snack and was trying to get the food out of the LMC as well, they could go to the cafeteria. That's been extremely successful so far. Joe and I have both had students who have chosen to meet with us to see what they can do to get into privileged study hall early, and several of them have been successful in meeting those goals. So PBIS committee actually is meeting again on Thursday, same as Mandy's team, and we're going to take a look at the climate plan. We've also put a focus on getting that committee involved in getting faculty to take a look at what our role is in teaching high school students behavior. And there has been in the past a belief that by the time they get to high school we really shouldn't have to teach them behavior. And that's just not accurate. So, so we've done a variety of activities faculty-wide that highlight collaboration and gives everybody an opportunity to you take a look at certain problems of practice. For instance, last week in our PD, we presented some behavior data up to this point. And I purposefully didn't focus, I didn't compare last year to this year, but we took a look at, here's the state of the RAM right now. And we found that one of our biggest issues so far this year is attendance and tardies. So we engaged the faculty in a school-wide large group discussion, as well as small focus group discussion on kind of what Sheila was doing with her faculty in terms of, do we need to be more consistent in our practice? It is definitely, it can be challenging to get high school teachers to see that while you certainly need to have your autonomy, that there's also certain things that we need to get on the same page with. So we had some really rich discussion around that concept, and then continued that with our building leadership team today. In terms of relationships, and I'm really just piggybacking on a lot of what Sheila and Mandy have talked about, our focus has also been, especially this year, expectation versus rules and the don't do's. Did a brief experiment with the faculty, we could even do it right here, talking about trying to word things in, here's what we expect from you, as opposed to here's what you shouldn't do. And I had said to everybody, don't turn around and look behind you right now. Everything's fine, you're safe, just don't turn your head. And waited. And then asked them, how many of you have thought about turning your head 6 times in the last 7 seconds? And most of the faculty raised their hands. So the point was, go back, take a look at your classroom rules, your classroom expectations. We revamped the student handbook over the summer to take out a lot of the negative don't do language and put more of the here's what we expect from you. What we're finding is we're going to have to do a little more revamping next summer, which I think we might have taken out too many don't do's. But that's all right. It's all a work in process. Also looking to engage the PBIS committee in how can we put some consistent measures in place to continue to show appreciation to the faculty and amongst faculty. Faculty meetings start with celebrations every time. That has been well received. I've had a rock in a U-Rock bag for 2 years, and I'm dying to get the PBIS committee to come up with a way that we can do something similar to what Mandy's talking about. And I'd like for it for that rock to end up at every faculty meeting. Whoever has it has to go through and share all the good stuff that has been passed along since the last faculty meeting. So I want to involve our students and teachers on the PBIS committee in that initiative, as well as share the climate data, which I'll end with this piece. The climate data also, like Mandy, drove one of our focus goals. Joe and I both took on climate and communication, because while the results of the parent survey and teacher surveys were overall positive, there were a couple of areas that troubled me, and I am puzzled right now as to whether or not those are true issues or perception issues that require more positive and consistent communication. As well as ensuring that faculty understands their roles and responsibility in terms of addressing school-wide issues of policy violation and things like that. So we focused on that in a couple of faculty meetings already this year. And the final piece I'll talk about, which maybe sounds like more the punitive side, but I think it helps with the communication. PBIS committee engaged in revising our behavior referrals that we had been using. And in that revision, we really intended to tease out what types of information we're asking teachers to complete when they go to fill out a behavior referral. And the focus goes back to the relationship. Teachers are asked to identify strategies that they've tried prior to deciding to fill out this referral. And there's also an option on there that we call documentation only. And we explained explicitly to teachers at the beginning of the year that box can be very powerful, because if this is something that you feel that administration needs to know about and you're not looking for further consequence, it's a great tool for Joe or I when we're looking at a referral and sitting in front of the kid to say, Mrs. Snowflake marked documentation only, what do you think that means? And it really helps us to then bridge that conversation between the student and the teacher, and getting, whether we're facilitating that conversation or we're encouraging the teacher to pull the student aside and have it, or in some cases encouraging the student to go back and have it with the teacher. So I think I'll stop rambling at this point. I could go on, I probably have a few more things, but that's where we are.
Very much.
All right.
Sure. Comments?
So it seems like you're doing a lot of work up front on the survey to align and make sure that it's developmentally appropriate. And I understand with each of the climate plans that there's also developmentally appropriate and school-specific attributes to them. but did the three of you ever sit down and take a look at the plans as you create them afterwards and see where there might be potential alignments in terms of teacher recognition programs or things that one school might be doing really well that you could leverage across the other?
We haven't yet. I have to say, for the middle school, it took last year to really make sure that the middle school is consistent among 4 or 5, so it's a great idea if you move forward.
One of the a little bit of small departure, but a lot of the components and the essential pieces are the same, is that the Goodwin Committee chose to follow the responsive classroom and character education model because, you know, with young children, they didn't want to get really involved in a reward system at all. They wanted to kind of like follow the rules because you're supposed to. And that was something really important to them early on when kids are making an adjustment to being somewhere other than in the company of their parents or in a home setting. But that's really the only line of demarcation, I think, is that there are different program bookends.
Right,
but
and we both have the same grant.
and they
that we're
both
working
have
with, which is out of
PBIS,
the
which is a little bit of a variation from responsive classroom and character ed. So, but I think many of our intents and programs and hopeful endings are the same, and I think that's a great idea to take a look at some common threads. I think it's great.
Even sitting here, I mean, I knew some of this, but to hear it spread out in detail, you know, I joke about the third grade skits in the foosball table, but secretly I'm going, I don't even foosball table. So, you know, I think it's helpful, some kind of.
And I've got some good ideas myself.
Excellent, thank you very much. Any other, George?
Yeah, so I mean, again, this is great stuff, right? So it feels like there's a similar there should be some overlap between this survey and the student, or the developmental asset survey that Towson used, right? I mean, do you guys take a look at the two and see whether they, I mean, one really should be impacting the other?
It's not that you're agreeing.
Well, not Sheila's level, but Sheila Brown's level, but certainly between 6 and.
And the fourth, when we did our developmental asset survey results, we did our climate survey results at the same time with faculty. So it was just kind of more of an organic conversation about how the two tie in, but we specifically planned our PD on climate for that day, and we did review both, and there were a lot of great conversations about it, but that's kind of
Yeah, I think what we need to be mindful of with that survey is that survey reaches across the whole community. There are segments that focus on the school or the school system, but we have to make sure that we tease out just those areas that are specific to the school that we have, you know, a little more, for lack of a better term, control over.
The 40 developmental assets that are measured in the survey have never been formally presented to our faculties until this year. So for the first time, we had Tim Duffy come, forget the name of the institute, but Research Institute, Search Institute, thank you. So he is very much involved with the metrics behind the survey and why certain questions are asked and how different questions come together to give us a theme. So for the first time, that was presented to the faculty, so we have a much better chance to weave in the beliefs and the model of the assets into our climate surveys.
And what's nice
So it's a
about
nice,
what's nice about that is that then draws community resources in. So when we have great relationships with youth family services and a number of organizations in the community, but it isn't a school problem. In other words, it says these are things that our students have as resources, and these are things that some of our students don't have as resources. And now it's the community's work to figure out how to help students get those resources or provide them. You know, be the adult who works with the child because he or she doesn't have someone like that in his or her life.
Yeah, I have to agree with Kelly. I think, you know, you do a great job in the transition between third and middle school and middle school. I think the same climate is probably something to roll into that. Because kids don't end third grade and all of a sudden become a fourth grade. I mean, they still look forward to those things that have kept them safe for the last 3 or 4 years. So it's, yeah.
I would just like to add too, in terms of high school faculty, I am very proud of our faculty and extremely impressed with their their focus and buy-in to the fact that relationships are the foundation. And that's, you don't always see that at the high school level. I think it tends to be more prominent, especially at the elementary, middle school, not always, and there's a lot of work that has to happen with that. But with Tim Duffy's presentation last week, teachers were extremely engaged in this presentation, and one of the things that he shared, I'm sure he shared it with the other schools, was another school somewhere else in the country, I believe, might have been in Canada. They engaged in an activity where they put the name of every student on the wall, and teachers had stickers, and they had to go around and put a sticker on the name of every student that they knew by name and knew what that kid was passionate about. And then they stood back and they looked at the names that had no stickers. And a lot of times, in some of my experiences, high school faculties would be kind of hot and cold on something like that. Like, oh, come on, we're going to teach them science, we're going to teach them social studies. I think if I would have had names ready, our faculty was ready to do that activity. I mean, they were very excited about, wow, that would be interesting, let's see. So, there is a focus on the relationship piece and an interest in digging more into that is very ripe right now. And I'm extremely pleased with where we're headed.
Anything else? Thank you very much. Jan, you're going to summarize the community conversation
Very
for us?
quickly. Last year we had 60 parents at our community conversation. This year, not so much. This year we had only 11, I think 12 by the end of the evening. But we offered a number of different initiatives. One was on closed reading strategies, which we are doing in all 3 schools. It's something we're doing district-wide. Strategic plan updates, school security, which is always popular. And student grading, and then an update on the website. And these were generated from interests that folks have had last year and things that came up to us over the summer and early in the fall. So there wasn't as much attendance. In the feedback, we did do a Survey Monkey survey, and in the feedback we received, there was some concern about the timing. So we do have another one on our calendar for February 26th, and maybe that timing will be better. But the people who came were very pleased with the information they received. They were happy to get it. They were very thankful that we were willing to come out and talk with them. And remember, those are done in a very casual setting. It's we extended it to 15-minute sessions this time because 10 minutes instead was too short, and some of them are still feeling this might be too short. But the opportunity to get around and just hit the topics they wanted to know more about. They didn't have to go to all of them. They could certainly go to all of them. That was done on that evening. We're going to try one more time. Hopefully we will have good attendance as we did last February. If not, then we'll look for a different format, but we don't want to stop having these.
It was raining.
It was raining.
Yeah, that was the
It was
back
raining.
then, yeah. Any comments or questions, Eileen?
I was going to say that I appreciate that we continued getting the minutes from Trent on various committees. So for instance, I went to the grading session, and so we kind of get updates to read and see where it's headed and where it's going, and I think that's advantageous. And it was very open, and it was really inviting people's input. I think it's valuable.
Anything else? Okay. In terms of the meeting calendar, as you know, we had a couple of conversations at a couple of our recent board self-evaluations about the meeting schedule, particularly focused in the spring, and this idea of whether or not we were going to have meeting, the every other Tuesday have some of those Tuesdays reserved for committees, or use some of those Tuesdays for the board self-evaluation or the superintendent's evaluation, et cetera. George had asked us at one of the meetings to take a step back and take a look at that. It seemed like the sense of the board was to restore more full board meetings, and so this was a fairly easy exercise for this part, which is step 1, which is that we've got to vote on this tonight because by December 1st we've got to notify the clerk, the town clerk, who then sends on to the Secretary of State what our meeting schedule is for the calendar year 2015. So basically all we did was, Trent and Jan did this at my request, which was simply remove the references to meeting as committees or to some of these other things other than full board meetings, and we restored those. At least that was the hope. I know we had to work around some holidays and things like that, but we restored some meetings. And then for the fall, which will be the beginning of our academic year meeting calendar that we still have to finalize, and I'll talk about that in a second, we basically went, to the every other, Tuesday for the fall months. There is an election again in November, so you do see, some of those changes. But other than the things like, an election day, we're back to more full board meetings. So there are two things that you should be mindful of. One is that we now need to figure out what we're going to do about finding dates for some of those other things. Now, we did remove Jan's mid-year evaluation after year one, which was one of the things, so we didn't have to worry so much about that one. But we do have to look for board self-evaluation and superintendent evaluation meetings. So keep that on your mind, because we'll have to talk about that. I know in particular if we're going to get Attorney Littlefield involved, and we're going to have to pick dates and like that. And so presumably we could use one of those meeting times, but the board seemed to be inclined to do this, and so this is responsive to what I got was the sense of the board. The second thing that you should just keep in mind is we still have to do our academic year 15-16 calendar, but we usually don't do that until we have the academic year calendar done, because, for example, we don't meet when there's holiday, school vacation days and this and that. So we expect it to be pretty much the same, but until the calendar actually is produced, the academic year calendar for the school system, we usually conform our meeting dates around that schedule. So I don't think there'll be any big surprises. I think it'll look a lot like, the academic year calendar will probably look a lot like what you can imagine it would look like. Our meeting calendar for the whole academic year will probably be pretty easy to predict, but we really can't do that, one without the other. So we are only doing what we need to do tonight, which is passing a calendar year 2015 board meeting schedule, so that we can notify the town clerk, who notifies the Secretary of State. Pretty much boils down to that. So if there are any questions or comments, we can take them at this time. Otherwise, it's one of the things that we're required to do so that the public is noticed a year in advance of what our intended meeting schedule is. All right, any comments? Can I have a motion to approve the calendar year 2015 Board of Education meeting calendar as presented by, what's your name? Eileen, I know. Seconded by Joanne. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed or any abstentions? Okay, so that was painless, and but the pain will come in trying to find the 2 or 3 other nights that we need for the other things that we've taken off this calendar. Teacher evaluation plan approval, Jan and Heston.
I'm actually going to ask Heston and Sheila Brown to move forward. They're the two who are chairing the PDAC committee, the Professional Development Evaluation Committee this year. And they have an update. I know you probably feel like you've seen teacher evaluation for approval almost every other meeting. And that's because you approved one in the fall. We were able to tweak it late winter, early spring, because the state gave us some changes that we were able to adopt. Then we had to present one to you at the last meeting in June, submitted that to the state over the summer. They asked us to make some changes, relatively minor changes, but that's what we're here to present to you this evening, are those relatively minor changes, and we do need yet again to have a vote on it. So with that, Heston and Sheila.
So we had to wait until we came back to school to get the PDAC committee together to speak about the changes. Sheila, please help me remember the 2 changes. One was with the percentage of standardized assessment of how much of, it was 22.5% of a standardized assessment had to be part of the teacher's
IAGDs if they had a standardized assessment associated with their content.
In other words, if your SLO, if your SLO was related.
We're not sure what they mean.
We know what you have on like.
If your
The
student
data
learning
from the student
objective
learning
was
objective.
aligned with a content area that's measured by a state assessment, at least 22.5% of your assessment of your IAGD had to be.
So as I'll try it one more time.
You want to do SLO and IAGD for?
So as teachers set goals, they have to use data to verify that their students are reaching those goals.
Okay.
22.5% of the assessment data that they used had to come from a standardized test if their content area had a standardized
Okay.
test.
Okay.
SLOs,
I understand that. I'm just trying to-
IGDs are the
Right.
evidence that you're
I
using.
understand.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
What was the second piece that was revised?
IAGD, assessment
Individual growth and development.
Indicator of
Is it?
academic growth and development.
Indicator of academic growth and
Indicator
development.
of,
Yeah.
And then I think
Do you need a
the
song?
second part, I'm sorry, there's been so many changes. The second part, I believe, had to do with when teachers set goals, the administrator and the teacher had to mutually agree to the goals. In our original language says that the administrator approved the goals, so now it has to be mutually agreed upon, which we do anyway. It was a matter of semantics in the language. So we resubmitted, the state did get back to us, they approved our changes. That has come back to PDAC. And so now we're going to continue to look at the document, go through the process, and make further changes. And we'll be back again next year as we have to submit to the State Department again.
And then just one additional change was that they wanted us to explain in more detail how evaluators would be normed so that we were all
Correct.
identifying teaching, good teaching in a particular way. We've already had our first norming activity as a group this week. And we'll continue to do those using the district leadership team meetings or a separate professional development meeting for the administrators. And actually, it was a very good opportunity for us to see videotapes of teachers and to assess what we believed we were seeing and then talk about it.
Because it's just a small portion, I mean, it's 22 or 23%.
22 and a half.
Yeah, and being an educator myself, just getting a sense of a standardized test and being able to then assess each student, then you have to be accountable for their growth or lack of growth. So is that something that's just ongoing, where teachers would sit with an administrator and go through each student in their class, or how does that work?
So every teacher has to set one student learning objective goal. So there's a process of the teacher meeting with each administrator, discussing what the overall theme of that goal will be. And in many cases, they could be department-wide, they could be school-wide. And then they discuss also what data they'll use to measure that growth or lack of growth, as you said.
For that student.
So that's mutually agreed upon. It's recorded in our Bloom board software. And it's something that the teacher and the administrator will revisit halfway through the year to see if what they predicted and what tools they're using were helpful. If not, they can readjust. And then we go into the summative process at the end of the year where we're looking at the results of either standardized or curriculum-based measures to show that growth or not. And the true growth for our teachers have not been what assessments we use, but it's the conversation and looking at each child and moving them forward. That's where this plan has been most beneficial. And I guess brought up real quickly to remind you that there are 4 components to our plan. The teacher practice component, which is 45%, or 40% rather, that's the observations in the classroom, either formal or informal. There's the goal setting process, which is the student growth and development, is 45%. We have the parent feedback through the climate surveys, which is 10%. And then the whole school learning indicator is 5%. And to remind you what that is, SPI, which is a school performance index. It's a matrix that's produced for each school based on how our students do as a group on the SBAC assessment. So all of those are fed into Bloomboard. Bloomboard does the calculations for the summative assessment. The report is generated at the end of the year. Again, the teacher and student administrator have to come together to discuss that assessment. And then all that data for all of our teachers is uploaded to the state of Connecticut. So they have that data as well.
If there's a goal-setting requirement in the sense of mutual agreement by administrator and teacher on a goal or whatever array of goals, is there a procedure to handle an impasse where the teacher refuses to agree to or the administrator refuses to agree to the same goals?
There's a written dispute resolution process right in our plan. Great question.
I think one of the most difficult things in response to you, Eileen, is that especially at the high school level and even in transition from 3rd or 4th grade or what have you, in order to have a state assessment, be part of the success of an SLO, you have to have baseline data. So there isn't always in all content areas that baseline data, because it may be the first time someone took a course that does have an assessment, but not a pre and a post. So it makes it very difficult to really incorporate state assessments if you don't have baseline data for your students. Because you can't show growth over time if you don't have where they started from. So, you can set a goal saying, I want all of my students to perform at 80% of success on a state test, but then you have those variations in differentiation of where students are when they enter your class. So, you have to take that into consideration. It's not an easy task without that baseline data.
Yes, Holly?
In regards to the student feedback piece, I know we didn't select it this year. Is that something that we'll ever consider doing, or?
We revisit our plan every year. So we have an opportunity to choose the student feedback as a PDAC committee. And that's certainly something that we will revisit and we can choose.
Just going to follow up on that. So because I've always been a district that incorporates student feedback, and the students often are the ones that definitely have a point of view in terms of teachers and their style and their way of learning. So a question might be, do you sense that there'd be any resistance to having students on the committee, or?
Well, the only difference now is we do get student feedback through our climate surveys. The difference would be that we would use that data in teacher evaluation, which we don't do now. But students do have a voice. They are a big part of our climate plans. So it's not as if we do not.
I understand.
So climate is one construct, but teachers, effectiveness in teaching, or the teaching and learning environment outside of the climate side. I mean, is there feedback, almost like 360 feedback on the teacher? Is that kind of what you're talking about? Because that's what I don't think climate answers some of the questions that we might want to get out of a student, out of student feedback on the teaching and learning environment, et cetera, et cetera. So are there tools out there that might be discussed for
There
that
are.
kind of feedback?
There are tools that are part of the SEED process from the state. There is a group called Panoramic that publishes student surveys that we have looked at. It's just that we haven't opted to use them at this point.
I understand that part. Because I just want to make sure that, in the future, because I agree with Holly, we should revisit, that should be revisited by the appropriate group that takes a look at that. And I think I would ask for people to consider a more expansive set of inputs, not just focusing on climate, which is extremely important, but it doesn't get at that teaching and learning environment.
It's not individualized, that's for sure.
Right.
There's nothing on the climate
Right.
that's individualized.
Right. So,
Yeah, just to
Karen?
reinforce it, that this is a topic that continues to come up with this board. So I would just hope that, the committee is aware of that, and that growth will continue to keep coming up as a question or concern, so.
At the university level, professors find it very useful to get feedback from their students as
the
to.
good ones do.
But it's
No, it's a
something
big
that's
part of it.
used quite often at the university level for lots of reasons. But, the ones that I've seen from Panorama are, certainly, they aren't, ones where you could be vindictive and, crucify somebody. They're really pretty specific.
My experience is students, for the most part, you kind of, the old way we used to do the Olympic judging, throw out the low ones because they hate you, throw out the high ones because they love you. It took just to look at the great middle and kind of see where those things are, because students are remarkably honest with these. That's my experience of 21 years of college teaching, is remarkably honest. And you just don't worry so much about the outliers, because everybody has their fans and everybody has their detractors. But you look at that 80 or 90% in the middle, and you really get a sense of how you're doing. Eileen?
I'm saying it's interesting because having experience teaching on the state level, they actually, say Southern, Connecticut State University, when you teach, they have a form for students to fill out. So it'd be interesting that because it's state, and this is actually state initiative to go with teacher evaluation, it would only make sense that there would be a student component, because if higher education is doing it, we're always looking at making sure that it trickles down. and it's effective, because if you're not effective, then your dean is gonna call you and say, let's talk about
That's right.
some of these statistics and why if, and maybe we should change some of your strategies or the way you teach it.
So I would suggest our next meeting, the 25th, I believe, that we can make this an agenda item. And we simply bring it to the, I'll keep back to you, simply bring it to their attention, not that we have to address it that day,
It's
but
gonna
it's
take some
something that
time
needs
for
to be
you.
discussed.
Right. It's
Well, I
gonna take
think
some
it
time
would
for
be
you
a
to.
great idea for them to take back to their individual schools. It's set up now where we have resident experts at all of the schools that are on the committee, that they're the people that, you know, folks should go to with questions and concerns. And in this instance, it might be something they can bring back to their constituents to discuss.
And just to piggyback off of
Sure.
what you said, Mario, I mean, it's, in your report, it actually says the Gates Foundation actually has done those surveys and it's very reliable. They really feel it's an important part of.
No one's been opposed to it at all, it just hasn't something that we didn't choose to do in
That's
the
fine.
beginning.
All right, I think the message is there and received, and we'll follow up as well. Is there anything else on teacher evaluations? We need to approve the plan, right? Did we do that? Yes, we did. I have my notes that it's been approved. And so the motion was approved unanimously.
We need to move it again with the amendments.
Oh, that was the meeting calendar. All right, so I need somebody to move this, sorry. My notes are wrong. I need somebody to move the approval of the teacher evaluation plan. Karen? And who's in the second? I think it'll be Eileen. I heard you first. Sorry. Any discussion on the motion to approve the teacher evaluation plan, the slight change that we got? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed or any abstentions? Okay, unanimous. All right, those are all the agenda items we have. You have your reminders, and thank you very much. I need a motion to adjourn at 9:05. Second, Eileen and Karen, all those in favor? Aye. All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.
So we're still meeting on the 25th.
We're still meeting on the 25th. Yeah.